Noon in Washington, and Ronald Reagan becomes the 40th President of the United States.
So help me God.
35 minutes later in Tehran, Iranians finally release 52 American hostages after 14.5 months in captivity. We'll have reports.
From ABC, this is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings in Frankfurt, Max Robinson in Chicago, and from our desk in Washington, Frank Reynolds.
Good evening. Now, day one. Day one of Ronald Reagan's presidency, and day one of freedom for 52 Americans. Though thousands of miles apart, these two historic events moved almost on parallel tracks today. The new president had not been in office an hour when the former hostages became free men and women again. And they are well along now on their trip to West Germany and eventually to home. For the latest on their return to freedom, here is Peter Jennings in West Germany. Peter?
Frank, the Algerian 727 carrying the freed hostages left Athens about 1 hour ago. It's now over the Mediterranean. It was on the ground 90 minutes for refueling. No one disembarked. The American ambassador to Greece, Bob McCloskey, did not go on board, but he did send some flowers on board, and he got a note back from his old friend Bruce Langan, who said, "I am very glad to be finally going home." It is about a 3-hour flight from Athens to Algiers, where the former captives should arrive about 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We've seen only 2 pictures from Tehran itself today. Iranian television did not transmit any of its coverage outside the country. We have seen 2 still photos. In one, Joseph Subik Jr., the second from the left, is being escorted by 3 Iranians. Subik, whose parents live in Redford, Michigan, had once been specifically accused by his captors of being a spy. In the second picture, Donald Cook, he's the one with glasses and a beard and somewhat more familiar to us, is also being escorted. For Cook, at 25, Tehran was his first overseas post with the State Department. Well, the Iranians who watch television have seen more than we have. It's been on local television there, and in Tehran, the Australian reporter Ray Sinclair offers his impression of what he saw.
I think a lot of people at the other end are going to be quite shocked by what they see of the Americans who will get off that plane. Just looking at them, they appear to have, momentarily at least, lost complete touch with reality. I'm quite sure they cannot conceive that they are free now. Their faces are blank, their eyes are glazed. It's a stunning emotional experience.
One of the last people to see the Americans in person just before the plane left was the Swiss ambassador Eric Lang. 2 hostages, he said, had difficulty walking, but the others looked fit. They have aged, said the ambassador, and he referred specifically to the chargé d'affaires Bruce Langan, an old friend of his at Will. It was childlike, the ambassador said. The hostages, couldn't quite believe they were leaving, but they were falling all over each other with emotion. There was laughing, and there were tears. Many, perhaps most, had not seen each other for those 14 months. It was, said Ambassador Lang, a moment that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And so it is now Algiers where world attention will be focused. Without the Algerian government, this deal for the Americans' freedom would not have been made. And when the 52 stopped there, briefly, there are no plans for them to remain overnight. Algeria's role in all this should deservedly be restated. In Algiers, here's ABC's Luciaffi.
The 2 American Nightingales, which will carry the hostages on the next leg of their voyage, arrived here at Algiers airport tonight. These medical evacuation planes are designed to give emergency treatment until they reach a major medical facility, and they may be necessary. As ABC News has reported, some of the hostages are physically and mentally tired. 2 of them are said to be having difficulty walking. But tired or not, their arrival here is going to be the cause for celebration.
Even before the hostages arrived, the American negotiating team in Algiers held its own party, popping the corks in a couple of bottles of champagne to mark the end of a long, difficult, and often frustrating effort to get the Americans released. The mood of celebration was echoed by the head of the delegation, Deputy Secretary of State Warren Christopher.
Just say I'm very happy.
Once on the ground, the hostages will be taken to the VIP lounge at Algiers Airport for a short 1.5-hour stop to change planes. They'll be greeted by Algeria's foreign minister, who played an important role in the final drama. There may be an informal reception, but nothing elaborate. The Algerians understand the impatience of the hostages to waste no time continuing on their way. The next destination, West Germany, and an American military hospital at Wiesbaden, the next to the last stop on their long trip home. Peter?
Lou, thank you very much. Perhaps I needn't remind you, but wherever the hostages are, and especially when they get here to West Germany, ABC News will be on the air. Frank?
Thank you, Peter. We certainly will be, and we'll be back to you, too, later in this broadcast. Well, before this day of happiness could dawn, there were more anxious hours during the long night. In this country, the command post, as often in a time of crisis, the Oval Office of the White House. We have a report from Barry Dunsmore.
It wasn't the first time that top Carter administration officials had spent sleepless nights in the Oval Office over Iran. But no matter what, it would be their last. This one had a different ending.
Mr. President, Secretary Miller.
All right, here we go.
Hello? Yeah, we... Right on, man. That's great. That's great. Okay, now, the next step then... So that'll go to Algiers. And Algiers, when they notify Iran, will notify us back, right?
Later this morning, after word was received that Iran had taken all the necessary steps to make the transfer of its assets possible, Mr. Carter could relax even more, although there was always the nagging doubt. It wasn't until the motorcade on their way to the capital that the president was able to tell the president-elect that the hostages were aboard planes and would be airborne in 15 or 20 minutes. But it would be longer. Finally, just before Mr. Carter got to Andrews Air Force Base for his trip home to planes, the hostages' departure was officially confirmed. They had taken off about a half an hour after he was no longer president. The timing could hardly have been accidental. Once the planes had left Iran's airspace, members of the Iran working group at the State Department could take their first sigh of relief and begin formally informing hostage families that everyone was out and safe. Relief, exhaustion, and disbelief were the prevailing emotions. Also at the State Department, Mrs. Louisa Kennedy, who had become a hostage family spokesman, said she was numb. She also described the Iranians' last-minute toying as revolting. Mrs. Catherine Keogh, whose husband was the school teacher who just happened to be in the embassy when it was taken, spoke eloquently of the emotions of the moment.
I think what you are looking at is about 15 months of holding one's emotions in check. And to shed all of that magically with a snap of the finger and say it's over is very difficult to do. We are experiencing a decompression as almost exactly the kind of decompression that the hostages must be going through.
Outgoing Secretary of State Muskie also had some thoughts on what the hostage crisis had meant to him.
Well, I suppose, in a sense, I'll be known in the footnotes of State Department history as the hostage secretary. I came in because of this problem, and because of it, I was not destined to continue, and they've come home at the end. I think it's perfect.
The State Department is nearly empty this evening. The Carter folks have left. The Reagan people haven't yet arrived. Many of the professionals don't know what they're going to be doing. Such circumstances don't really lend themselves to celebrations. However, there is an overwhelming sense of relief here that the new administration can begin without the curse of the Iran crisis. Barry Dunsmore, ABC News, the State Department.
Well, still ahead, the joyful reaction of the families of the freed Americans as they learn that this time it's true. We'll look at exactly what preparations are underway at the hospital in Wiesbaden, where the former hostages will spend the rest of the week, and we'll report on Ronald Reagan as he assumes the office of President of the United States.
ABC's World News Tonight, brought to you by Budweiser.
This Bud's for everyone who works, so we can play.
This Bud's for you. For all you do, the king of beers is coming through.
Yeah, just for you. That distinctively clean, crisp taste that says Budweiser.
For all you do.
This Bud's for you.